How do we measure civilization? Originality, creativity, beauty. We measure civilization by the institutions. Islamic institutions are at their weakest point ever. The Islamic civilization has not just deteriorated, but crumbled. We live in an age where what is fake is the order of the day. Islamic tradition is full of beauty, but seeing the Islamic tradition hijacked and co-opted and leveraged in so many thoroughly ugly ways is a betrayal of divinity. And every time human beings are simply imitators, incapable of originality, they betray God's potential and God's beauty.
Professor, how has Islam been hijacked?
I was one of the very first voices to point the finger at Wahhabi Islam as hijacking Islam. When I look at the Islamic tradition, I find a very pluralistic and a very diverse tradition. Outsiders to that tradition, Orientalists, Western scholars, have described it as a tradition of ambiguity. Ambiguity is often where inventiveness and creativity, growth, certitude is a dangerous thing. Then you step into the modern age and you find literally a suffocating orthodoxy, certitude nearly in everything. And you find that largely that movement of certitude and strict orthodoxy was the birthplace of Wahhabi Islam, i.e. Saudi Islam. They hate diversity. They said, well, we've got to spread our form of Islam so it becomes the Orthodox Islam. And to do so, we must fight Sufism, we must fight rationalism, we must fight philosophy. When I was a student, we were all aware of the Wahhabi classes and how much they absolutely hated the Usulis and the Sufis and everyone else, actually, and how well-funded they were. And we all saw the ultimate result of that form of puritanical Islam in the birth of what was then a truly shocking and unprecedented movement, and the 9/11 attacks. Suddenly, in very recent years, Saudi Arabia cut off funding. And so Wahhabis have found themselves in a position that is unprecedented, where they basically have to look to their constituency for funding. With the retreat of Wahhabis, diversity and Sufism in particular has started thriving all over the Muslim world again. It's very tempting to want to cheat and take the shortcut. And the shortcut is, well, instead of having to do the hard job of convincing and winning the hearts and minds, I want to jump on the power of the state, Yes, the state gives you a shortcut, but the long-term consequences are disastrous.
What happened to the Islamic civilization? I know you've been asked many times, where are the best minds and where is the beauty of Islam?
What happened was the emergence of Western colonialism. We did not just have an industrial revolution and the industrial revolution just affected the West. The West was intent on colonizing the rest of the globe. Not just the Islamic civilization, but all indigenous civilizations all around the globe suffered. And they were materially altered and impacted. Who's in charge of the holy sites in Islam, Mecca and Medina? Well, it was largely decided by colonial powers, namely the British. So you had Britain actually controlling more Muslims than any caliphate. They're the ones that rubber-stamped Al Saud, what became Saudi Arabia, to be the rulers over Mecca and Medina. They're the ones that decided that Palestine would be partitioned and so on. But there is at a deeper level, why did innovation and creativity and the production of thought stop in the Muslim world? What allowed Muslim lands to be colonized, this is critical for Muslims themselves to understand, is that autocratic systems killed off, suffocated innovation and creativity and invention. A lot of Muslim thinkers don't realize that medieval autocracy is so different than modern autocracy since the 16th century. And medieval autocracy allowed spaces for self-determination and self-fulfillment. Modern autocracy doesn't allow for that type of growth. My prescription is a hard one because I believe that decolonialism is not possible until Muslims become serious students of Islamic history and Islamic intellectual tradition.
Position the word, the concept, the methodology, the school, usuli. Where does it sit in the world of Islam?
Islamic studies in the entire modern era has been controlled by Western scholars who are not Muslim. If Muslims start becoming, once again, the serious students of their own tradition, that's the only way to decolonize. So often, the medium that we have available to us are manuscripts. And the Islamic civilization produced millions of manuscripts, and manuscripts on every topic that you can imagine. The relationship to Islamic manuscripts is a love affair, because this is what, for me, defines the Islamic, at least the Islamic intellectual tradition. With the crumbling of the Islamic civilization and colonization and urbanization, so much of Islamic material culture had been wiped. Even as we speak, there are bulldozers that are destroying incredibly valuable monuments in Cairo, monuments that go back hundreds of years, because the government in Egypt has no awareness of the value of these incredible archaeological sites. That's how you discover how enormously rich the Islamic tradition is.
lot of people don't take the time to really know what their faith calls for. So education is critical.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you again for being here with us. So, 30 years ago, this year, I converted to Islam.
When I met my husband, he wrote this book, The Search for Beauty in Islam, and it's this very powerful heuristic. It's really beautiful to know what God's book calls for is diversity, questioning, exploration, and the power to be human.
The aspirations for the Usuli Institute is that I try to demonstrate a living example of what the opposite of civilizational deterioration might look like. Despotic cultures teach anxiety. Despotic cultures teach minuteness and smallness of mind. Despotic cultures teach cowardliness. But in all the years that I've been active with Human Rights Watch, or even when I won the Oslo Human Rights Award, people would assume that I'm in the human rights field because of Western influence. And I would always tell them I am involved in the human rights field out of my Islamic commitments. When the Qur'an prescribes dignity to human beings, this is classical Sharia. This is hundreds of years old. Nothing modern or Western or whatever.
So at the Usuli Institute now, we have gone through the entire Quran, chapter by chapter, deep dives in. We've pulled out the ethical message, and we've made it come alive for the problems that all of us understand and live through today. All of the stuff, the income equality, Me Too movement, human rights, all of the stuff that is really vibrant in our world. You look at it with a completely different lens, with a completely different understanding of Quranic ethics, and you're like, what this book is telling us is more relevant now than it was 1,400 years ago.
The experience that had the greatest effect on me is how humbling, thoroughly humbling, that approach where the emphasis is on the question that you ask, not the answer. And in fact, God's will is to search. You are not rewarded for the answer so much as you're rewarded for the search.
Is there interpretive fluidity? Can the meaning or interpretation of a text change or evolve over time based on how humans change or evolve over time?
The text's meaning must evolve. There is the written Qur'an and the created Qur'an. The created Qur'an is the birds, the animals, the trees, the flowers, reading God's will through creation. But it also includes the intellect, and it also includes intuition. The human soul is from God's breath. The human soul is divine. And so a human being is an ongoing revelation. And when this ongoing revelation comes into contact with the text, it is divinity coming into contact with divinity. That engagement is what makes the Quran an ongoing, a never-ending revelation. If the text of the Quran is approached as a text only to regurgitate, then the Quran becomes a closed book. There's no longer an ongoing revelation. It's just a word on text and that's it, we're done. And that's how the voice of God dims and becomes silent. If there is a key to understanding the Islamic civilization, I would say that the search for beauty, that is exactly the key. That's what produced all the Islamic culture that flowered. Music, poetry, art, paintings. Ethical virtue is beauty. The Prophet himself is described as a beautiful human being because he was a virtuous human being. You cannot sit back and just expect God to do what is beautiful for you. It won't happen. You must play the active role. God wants mercy to manifest in creation. And God has charged me as a human being, as a student of the Qur'an, to manifest this mercy. These are marching orders, and I take them very seriously.